Trigger warning. If you're a Gibson fanboy, you might not like this video. Hey everybody, it's been far too long since we've done an episode in the Can You Play a Metal On series. I love hearing from you guys as this show is dependent on what you, the viewers, want to see. And in that spirit, I have a question from the viewer Copper Dragon.
Hey Glenn, greetings from Oregon. I love the brutal honesty on here. Simple question, for the next Can You Play Metal On, will the next episode be on the Gibson SG?
Well, dude, that is a phenomenal idea. Let's take a look at the history of the Gibson SG. So far, we've looked at two other Gibson guitars and how they perform for metal, the Les Paul and the ES-335 hollow body. So to continue down the timeline of when Gibson were actually innovating and creating unique designs, it's only fitting that we take a look at another iconic guitar in the world of rock music, the SG. For starters, what the hell does SG even mean? Well, a lot of guys these days would probably say shitty guitar, but the truth is it actually stands for solid guitar. It started being developed around 1960. Over the previous several years, sales of the Gibson Les Paul began to rapidly decline, and Gibson knew that the guitar was due for a serious makeover. Working with the Les Paul as a base, the body was made much thinner and flat. This served two very important purposes. Not only did the thinner bodies allow Gibson to reduce production costs, it also made the guitars much lighter. And I'm sure many guitarists' shoulders were very grateful for that. The guitar was also given the now famous double cutaway design. This, paired with a neck joint that was moved back 3 frets, allowed guitarists much easier access to the higher frets, making solos much easier to play. However, due to the loss of weight in the body, the SG suffers from a very serious design flaw: neck dive. For those of you who don't know, neck dive is what happens when the center of gravity of a guitar shifts towards the neck due to an imbalance between the weight of the body and the weight of the neck. So when you put a strap on your guitar and you put it around your shoulder, it's going to slide out of a comfortable playing position. Fortunately, there are some ways to correct this, but this is a history lesson, not a woodworking tutorial. But we can also make a suggestion to the company that, hey guys, it's been 60 years. Maybe you should fix the fucking thing. I don't know. What do you think? The guitar finally made its debut in 1961 as the Gibson Les Paul SG and was advertised as having the fastest neck in the world. Throughout the years, the SG would also spawn new variations of the iconic design, including the SG Junior, which had only one P90 pickup in the bridge, and the SG Custom with 3 humbuckers, and even the ADS 1275 double neck. Hell, they even made an SG bass for all the stupid fucks out there who don't know how to mute their strings and are too lazy to learn the songs. Despite all the hype surrounding the new Gibson, not all was sunshine and rainbows behind the scenes. While the guitar was very popular, it turns out that the guitar's namesake, Les Paul, was not made aware of the redesign. In fact, he had nothing to do with it at all and ended up not liking it all that much. In the early 60s, Les Paul and his wife Mary Ford, who were a popular music duo with several hits under their belts, were going through a divorce. At the time, Les was making $1 per guitar sold in royalties. In order to protect some of those royalties, Les asked his friend and then president of Gibson, Ted McCarty, to withhold his royalties and to drop his name from the guitar. By 1963, Les Paul's name was removed from the guitar, and Gibson shortened its name down to just SG. Nevertheless, the SG was very popular and sold very quickly, so much so that Gibson's parent company, Chicago Musical Instruments, revived their own brand of guitars called Kalamazoo. In an attempt to try and capitalize on the SG's success, they released 2 models, the KG1 and the KG2, both of which featured a similar body style to the SG and were cheaper. Everyone from Frank Zappa to Alex Lifeson of Rush, George Harrison, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and even some of the later Beatles releases all sported the guitar. However, the SG is still most famously used by AC/DC's Angus Young and the iconic sound it gave their records. As with any instrument, what really counts is how well it works in a mix, so I've gathered together a few friends to put the SG through its paces. Al the Yeti Bones will be running his left-handed SG into a Soldano SLO 100 into a Rev 4x12 loaded with WGS Veteran 30 speakers. Cam Flory's on the drums and Eric Arco is on bass. Hit it! With its awesome soaring tones and amazing playability, it's easy to see why the SG is so popular among hard rock and metal guitarists. Tony Iommi ended up having problems with his Fender Stratocaster's pickup dying during his recording sessions on the first Black Sabbath album. And because they only had 2 days to record and repairs weren't so cheap or easy to come by in 1970, he opted to use his backup guitar, his SG. It was then that the guitar became the sound of the band, and Iommi became a devout SG player. He loved the fatter sound it gave over his Strat, but it was also easier for him to play. Because at 17, while he was working at a sheet metal factory, he had a pretty bad accident and ended up losing the tips of his middle and ring fingers, so his Strat would sometimes be hard for him to play. And the SG's easy upper fret access was the solution that he was looking for. So, can you play metal on an SG? Well, duh! Considering it was used on what could be considered the first metal album and its popularity among the new wave of British metal guys like Judas Priest, Glenn Tipton, it has certainly earned its iconic status. Hell, just go on to quipboard.com and you can see just how many metal guys have used one at some point in their careers. It's practically endless and shows just how big of an impact this guitar has had on the world of heavy metal. In 1963, Gibson discontinued the Explorer. In 1959 and again in 63, they discontinued the Flying V. And in 1961, even the famous Les Paul was discontinued, all as a result of low sales. The SG, however, is the only Gibson guitar that has never been discontinued and is their best-selling guitar of all time. That's right, it sold more than the Les Paul, the ES335, and even that pinnacle of Gibson's guitar designs, the totally gorgeous and not hideous at all $4,500 modern Flying V. Even though the SG is popularly known for classic rock and stoner metal, it definitely has its own flavor that lends itself extremely well to the metal sound. It's a damn shame that Gibson have replaced the business model of creating awesome guitar designs with a, hey, let's just sue our competitors business strategy. Because at the rate they're going, we may never see another Gibson guitar quite as iconic as the SG. So what do I think? Well, throughout my career, I've had a few less than favorable encounters with the SG. Back in 2009, I was recording the Betrayer self-titled album, and we had a 66 SG on loan. We were quad-tracking rhythm guitars, and due to a tuning stability issue, we had to throw out an entire album's worth of guitar tracks and start over with a Schecter Hellraiser. Because unlike Gibson, Schecter is capable of building an instrument that will stay in tune. Despite the tuning problem, the sound we got out of that guitar was fantastic. I also got to check out a 7-string SG that Oscar Garcia brought by the Hollywood studio about a year and a half ago. And unfortunately, that guitar had some major tuning issues as well, despite him pouring hundreds of dollars into that guitar in a desperate attempt to make it better. But who knows? Hey, your mileage may vary. Plenty of people have used the SG and got great results, but then again, don't bet the farm on it. Oh, fuck! Tried to hold that in. Okay.